Hi, I'm Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, the show where we share the powerful stories of people with disabilities and daring entrepreneurs making waves in our world. From technological innovations to best practices in business, we'll learn what it really means to live in an inclusive and universally designed environment. Welcome to a new episode of Mobility and Inclusion. I am your host, Harut Markarian, and my guest today is the chairman and co-founder of Pieces of Me Foundation, Daniel Hodges. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here with you.
It's good to have you here with us. And today we're going to talk about a lot of fun things that we've been talking about for the past, 2-3 months that we've known each other, right? And first, let me just say that Daniel has a visual challenge. Is it correct how I'm describing that?
Yeah, I mean, you could use that word. I use the word blind a lot because it kind of just gets things out in the open, but
Okay.
whatever.
Okay, so let me ask you, how do you want people to address you or help you? Because I know there's a lot of gray area there, and a lot of people don't know how to act or behave with someone with a different kinds of challenge. What do you think is the best way to approach someone with a disability?
So let me give a little bit of background first, and then we can kind of go into that question. So along with being blind, I also have a connective tissue disorder. So, today I've got a brace on my right wrist because it has a fairly decent injury to it, and I've got a couple of other places that are not cooperating today. And I had to point that out because how you look at someone who is blind versus someone who has other challenges or other circumstances may really alter the equation. But I think when it gets right down to it, communication is the key.
Mhm.
Asking, what can I do to help? Or would this be helpful? Things like that. Because not only does it vary from person to person, it varies, at least with myself, it varies from day to day or sometimes hour by hour.
Yeah.
I've gone through airports where I've needed a wheelchair because my leg was having a fit. I've gone through airports where I'm just like, you know what? Point me in the right direction. I don't even need an assistant. I've had circumstances in between. So it really just comes down to communication.
So it's just a matter of asking versus assuming
Yep,
before doing something, right? Um,
absolutely.
all right. So talk to me about the Pieces of Me Foundation. What's your role there, and where in the process are you with this organization?
So my cousin and I started putting Pieces of Me together in June of 2019. I was in the summer after my first year of law school, and we just had noticed among our own circumstances and with many people that we care about how many people with disabilities or chronic illnesses were still falling through the cracks or being underserved despite all of the other work that was happening. And I said, Christy, I think we could do something about this. I've had these ideas in my mind for a while and they're starting to crystallize. What do you think? And so over the last 2.5 years, we put a board together. We've gotten our 501c3, gotten incorporated, all of that good stuff, and really started to assemble a team that I'm really proud to work alongside and feel like we are really starting to make some impact by getting information out there and by helping people understand how much potential we can unleash by creating a real sense of equity.
And let's talk about the word equity. It's amazing you mentioned that. So the show obviously is called Mobility and Inclusion, and usually when I talk about inclusion, because in my opinion, the word inclusion has been given a lot of unnecessary definitions, and this is my personal opinion, of course. People can disagree, but when I talk about inclusion, I talk about people with disabilities. I talk about employment for people with disabilities. I talk about including the community of people with disabilities in our day-to-day activities, which, as you know, they're left behind for
Yep.
some reason. And you brought up equity, and I'm associating the word inclusion with equity at this point right now, because I think it's important to do that, right?
Yes.
So can you please talk a little bit about inclusion and equity and how you see that unveiling?
Absolutely. So equity really comes down to seeing the whole person and seeing that potential and saying, I'm not going to lower the standards for someone to be included on things that are meaningful, but I am going to strip away some of this extra fluff that provides access barriers or inclusion barriers. For instance, I use the example of I had to get through law school. I had to be able to read, process, analyze, and then utilize information from cases, from the law, etc. Now, I still had to do all of those things, but I did it differently.
Mhm.
So I didn't use a print book. I used an e-textbook. And there were some other, mild alterations to the program that allowed me to do what I do. But at the end of the day, my work had to be on par with my peers. And that's fair and that's right. It should be on par with our peers, but it should be done with the understanding that most of the things we think of as essential are really just things that we're used to having be done in a certain way. We've gotten into that routine. And by breaking free of that and looking at universal design, we really start to bring more people to the table in an authentic way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up a lot of good points here. So you talked about universal design. I'm going to ask you about the tools that you used, that you said, you studied and were wanted to hold yourself accountable to all your studies the same way the other your classmates were accountable for their studies, right? But
Yep.
you did it differently. So I want to ask you about the tools that you used, and I just want to wrap the inclusion and equity part here, and would by saying that um, in my book Mobility and Inclusion, there's a chapter that on inclusion where I talk about, you know like you said, look at the person, and look at the task, you know, and ask the person whether that task can be performed with the current situation, and if not, don't ask the person to change. See what you can do in the current environment, what you can change in the current environment that can fit that person to be successful in the task that is needed to be performed. You agree with that?
Absolutely. And I'll even say that it's not just for our benefit. We've talked before
Mm-hmm.
off camera about how universal design is the catalyst that helps bring forth innovations that benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting us out of that rut
Yeah.
and getting back to that creative phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And the universal design, for those who don't know what universal design is, in a very simplistic way of explanation, it's just a matter of putting everybody on the same on a level playing field, right? So designing our environment, our products, our services to the benefit of everyone, regardless of their ability or disability. And there's always things we can do, very simple things that we can do that can make a big difference in everyone's life. Now, let's talk about the tools that you used a little bit. Now, you said you used many tools, like the textbook, or you didn't use the conventional textbook. You used an ebook, I believe you said, right?
Yeah, so the iPad and most technology now comes with inborn speech to text software. We've made a lot of progress there. So we would a lot of times convert the textbook into a screen reader friendly PDF
Mm-hmm.
or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if the Kindle version was available, we'd use that. I also, because of my ADD, used a note taker so that I would be able to really concentrate on what the professor was saying and being involved as opposed to trying to multitask because I just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part was the fall of 2019 is an example where my wrist really started to flare up. It was bad enough to where I was having trouble moving my right hand at all. There was a cyst in there and it didn't even respond all that well to steroids, etc., etc.
Hmm.
Well, this is right before finals. And you have law school finals are the kind where you're going to be expected to write a couple of thousand words per prompt, basically, or at least per exam
Hmm.
to really get your points across. And so throughout that semester, as my wrist was getting worse, I finally sat down and typed out an email to my professors and to the student services offices. Look, it is literally hurting so bad that I want to cry sometimes trying to type this out. I understand I have to be able to convey information in a meaningful way to prove that I've understood the material.
Hmm.
And I understand I have to do it in a time similar to my peers as far as keeping up with the classes and stuff. So I'm coming to the table and making you aware of my circumstances so that we can figure this out. And the outpouring of support I got back from my professors was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I had one professor who just responded back almost immediately saying, "Look, I've had you in multiple classes before. I know you're getting the material. I know you'll be fine. Keep it up. You'll be okay. And, you know, we'll just take this one step at a time."
Hmm.
And that was really helpful, but it's also a matter of learning how to do that because it takes a fair amount of not just humility, but
Understanding.
understanding just to get to that point because it's hard to go to someone and say, "Look, I can't do these simple things and my circumstances are rapidly changing."
Hmm.
And so I'm going to actually tie that back to your first question of what can we do, and understanding that these circumstances do change and that there's a psychological process that we go through in order to adapt to our changing circumstances. Putting that into your empathy equation really is quite helpful, and it's such a simple thing that can have profound ramifications.
Yeah, absolutely. So, now that you're talking, I'm thinking about, things that people can do and various things that people, and we talked about universal design. Understanding is part of universal design, right?
Yep.
It's like it's in our design, in the human design, and how to understand each other, how to understand. The other word you used is humility, right? I think those are very important things that as we are dealing with people with different abilities, we have to understand their situation and we have to provide, as I said earlier, different ways of getting the job done or getting the task done. And once that's done, now we're helping everyone, you know?
You know, the funny thing about that too is it feeds off of what we've already been doing societally with regard to other cultures or other circumstances, ethnicities or orientations or whatever the case may be. And somehow disability was left out of that conversation in a large part. And
Mhm.
now, what we're really trying to do is flip that back around and say, no, not only should we be part of that overall discussion, but we can actually use that progress as a model to benefit all minority groups or everyone who doesn't feel like they don't have a sufficient place at the table in the status quo.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact here that the disability is the largest minority group in the world. So I don't know how, but we've somehow found a way, society have found a way to keep this community behind for so long. And I also know that you're a strong advocate for people with disabilities. Um, so, and you know that I've started a startup, a robotic startup to assist people with disabilities in performing their activity of daily living with these robotic platforms. And tell me why, when we first interacted together, why did you decide working with me, or what did you see in my offering that was appealing to you?
My initial impression from our first conversation and at every stage since has always been you do what is almost impossible in that you find that balance between you're offering a tool that can enhance well-being, enhance productivity, enhance a host of other things, but you're not offering a fix.
Mhm.
And I think there's been a lot of resistance within the broader disability movement for quite some time, and understandably so, when it comes to outsiders or people who are perceived as being outside of our minority offering different tools or other kind of products, because oftentimes it's given as something that is with little meaningful input from our
Mhm.
community, and it's presented as a fix. It has a back channel way of almost bringing up the eugenics history and all of these other things
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's like, okay, if we can't stuff you in a closet, we're at least going to try to make you normal. And I haven't picked up on a hint of that from you. I've gotten the impression of this is more like a phone or a tablet or something else that you can choose to use. You can choose to have your email at your fingertips 24/7, or you can choose not to.
Yeah.
And this is in that same vein.
Exactly, and this is really how this product was born. Really, what we're seeing next to us right now. By the way, I named the robot Grace. Have I told you that?
You did.
Yeah. So Grace is also my newest daughter's name. So, but I didn't name it after my daughter. I named it because Grace, the word Grace, has everything positive associated with it. So I thought it would be a great name for a robot because a robot is so, you know, not very, I don't know, appealing to me when I keep referring to this thing like a robot, right? At the end of the day, this is assisting me in doing something, in accomplishing a certain task. And when I first started the company, by the way, I had the vision to start a company to help people with disabilities since 2014, right? At the time, I was going through my master's program with robotics, and I was working on this brain computer interface for a wheelchair for people with extreme paralysis, right? And we were testing the wheelchair out. So it's like you wear a helmet and you think thoughts, and those thoughts let you move the wheelchair or propel the wheelchair forward, backwards, right turn, left turn, right? So you're actually maneuvering this wheelchair with your thoughts, and that was so cool to me. And then I sat on it to test this robot, and while I was testing it, I was having a hard time commanding the chair with my thoughts. But then the actual person who was using the wheelchair came and sat on it, and he was commanding the wheelchair with his thoughts as if I was driving a car. It was like second nature to him. And this is where how we differ. That person is used to thinking in different ways than I am, right? And that's why I wasn't successful in propelling the wheelchair, but he was, right? And when I saw that, and then when I saw like the happiness in his eyes, it was at that moment I said, okay, I'm gonna start a company working on robotics, which is cool stuff, right? And then I'm gonna use those cool stuff to make an impact in people's lives. And basically, that's when the first time I had the idea of starting a robotics company. And I don't know how many years later, 5, 6 years later, here we are right now. And to your earlier point, when I first started the company, when I incorporated the company, I didn't know what product to go to market with. So I started going to these shows and trade shows and talking to people, right? It's like, what do you need? Because the last thing I want to do, like you said, I want to come up with something that people are going to either reject the idea, say how stupid it is, or reject me for potentially providing a quote unquote fix,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't want that. And luckily for me, I had good mentors. And then now you're a mentor of mine in this space, at least, right? In the community of people with disabilities. And I appreciate you very much. Um, now, now you know what the product is. How do you think this product, who do you think this product can help, first of all?
I was thinking yesterday on my way to the airport to come down here how we really need to define what a mobility challenge is. We originally talked about this being available for someone with a mobility challenge, and that automatically conjures up this idea of someone who's maybe a chair user or,
Mm-hmm.
has arthritis or whatever. But
Yep.
there's so much more beyond that. People recovering from surgery, people who have vestibular or proprioceptive problems, people who have syncopal episodes and can't bend over and pick something up without risking a dangerous fall. And the list just goes on,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes this market of millions of people that we could serve.
Yep.
It's not a total addressable market in a sales
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's a total population of people that we have an opportunity to serve and bring something that'll be beneficial to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I was, as you know, I'm looking for investors. And when I was working through the data of who this product can serve, CDC lists that about 61 million people in the United States have some type of disability.
Yep.
Of those, 14.7 million have mobility challenges, have self-care difficulties, and performing activity of daily living is challenging for them, right?
Yep.
So 14.7 million people. And then I spoke to you and to other people. So these are data I found online, right? But when I started talking to people such as yourself, it's like there's this whole other side of the um the disability world that you're not really aware of, or the data doesn't show it, but it's
Yep.
there, right? And it's very hard for me when I'm, because, well, I'm not in your shoes, right? I'm not aware, like you said, bunch of words right now of disabilities or of challenges that people face that I don't even know what they mean, right? But the challenge that I'm having is like, how do I communicate that most efficiently with the investor that is going to see that how many people this is going to help, right? And you have become my mentor in that world.
Well, thank you. And it's been such a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to do. And the thought that comes to mind is the CDC data, and looking at it from that perspective almost creates a scarcity mentality in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people who are so impacted that they have to have this device? Well, wait a minute. That's the whole brunt of this conversation has been getting away from that. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we flip that on its head, how many people from would benefit from having this? Maybe it just decreases their workload enough that it just becomes a blessing for them to have this at their disposal. That is a much, much broader audience.
Yeah.
And, I think about things like the ramifications of COVID-19, where one of the after effects has been dysautonomia or deregulation of the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Those people, like myself, we can bend down and we can pick stuff up, but at what risk
Yeah. Yeah.
and at what toll? And so, again, it just comes back to reframing this question away from who absolutely needs this to how many people can we really share this with who are going to benefit from it just because it makes their life a little easier.
Yeah.
And that is a wide, wide market.
Absolutely, it is. And so what we're doing right now is we're putting the pitch in front of people out there, in front of investors, so they can see the benefit of this and the impact that this robot can make in the lives of many, right? You also talked about Marion. Marion has, what does she have again? You told me something about when she bends down, she can't come back up.
Yeah, so she has a condition called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS,
Mm-hmm.
not to be confused with the slang for a drug. That has happened before.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is, again, it's a deregulation of the autonomic nervous system. So without getting too into the weeds, it's that part of the nervous system that controls the body's fight or flight mechanisms. She, like many of us with different kinds of autonomic issues, has a difficulty regulating sodium and such.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that came to mind as we were looking at this, and as she was talking about it with me and whatever, it was, you know, again, she's got orders from neurologists of don't bend down and pick stuff up unless you have to. Have a kid do it, have a robot do it, whatever. But, you know, she's capable of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But that 1 in 1,000 time when she goes to do it and she gets so lightheaded that she collapses, why not avoid that if you can?
Absolutely. Because the ramifications then from a
Yeah.
fall or from any other situation are excessive, right? Are
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, how do you, now let's wrap this topic up, and I want to go back to your foundation, Pieces of Me Foundation. How can people support you in that foundation?
You know, the biggest thing we're looking for right now, other than, of course, we're a nonprofit, we need money.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what I'm really wanting to do is build a community of people with all kinds of different characteristics and circumstances. Whether or not you consider yourself to have a disability or to be an ally or whatever the case may be, the ethos of our organization is everyone has something to give and everyone has something to learn. Those two things are, I think, about as close to universally true as you're going to get in this world.
Yep.
And by harnessing the power of that community, you can provide real world support, friendship, connection to people in a way that we are lifting one another up. And ultimately, we are able to create a database of information that will outpace anything that is currently out there as far as understanding of resources, understanding of what lives are like, and how we can band together to improve our collective circumstances. It's all about that community, that collective wisdom, and raising that level of consciousness so that we can just continue to advance ourselves and advance all of society in incremental steps that are really meaningful.
That's awesome. And how can people get in touch with you?
So we'll put the information for the website and social media in the show notes. I will say also that our URL is piecesofme.org, and that is PEACES of me.org. We deliberately spelled it that way because we are not missing a piece as far as being broken. We are missing the piece, PEACE, of the strength that comes from banding together and lifting one another up, regardless of where we're at, so that we can all get to where we want to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderfully put. I think you even did the closing for me. No, but with that, I want to wrap the first episode of 2022 up. And all I want to say is an accessible world is an inclusive world. Let's make life accessible for all. Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.